It's time now for me to have the honor to introduce our keynote speaker, who is Dr. James Kutch, who is the president and CEO, let's try to say CEO, as opposed to seeing O, never mind, who's the president and CEO of Seeing Eye Inc. 3 times fast, thank you.
I have to stop before I start and say, Karen called me, a long time ago, maybe a year, maybe 14 months ago, and asked me if I would do this. And I said yes, and we talked a little bit about what presentation I would make and so on, and everything was set until 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I got this form from the college, and I had to swear on my life that everything I said could be recorded and could be rebroadcast, and everything was 100% original and no material was copyright anybody else or anything. Well, that blew the whole talk because I had video clips from one of my favorite movies, The Shawshank Redemption. I encourage you to go watch it and think about The Shawshank Redemption under the thought of disability. There's a lot of parallels. He's in prison, he doesn't want to be, it's unfair, he didn't commit the crime, he made the best of a bad situation. It's a great speech. I can't give it to you, okay? Because it's a copyrighted movie. So, this next best plan is I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life. Now, for those of you that are watching the video and everybody in the legal department, I promise you, this is, I lived my life, okay? Nobody else did. So what I want to do is use a lot of personal examples. I want to describe some life challenges, and I want to show how each of those opportunities was turned, those challenges were turned into opportunities. Out of this, whether you're a person who is blind, as I am, whether you are a person working in the field, whether you're a potential employer, or whether you're a person who's just a friend of a person who is blind, listen to this, and I don't care if you're impressed with the story. The point is not to impress you with things I've done. The point is for you to think about 1 or 2 things out of this story that might have you think about blindness in a different way, and technology in a different way. Things are a lot different than they are now than they were when I first experienced blindness. I was in high school in the 1960s. I was very interested in math and science, and I had a friend who was very interested in guns and pyrotechnics. And so my friend and I used to experiment with things that are way illegal today, but this was back in the hills of West Virginia, carbide cannons, My friend, for the high school science fair, made a fully automatic .22 caliber machine gun. Try to do that in 2007. But it was the 60s, it was West Virginia, what can I say? These days, we'd probably all be called terrorists. But along the way, I started experimenting with things that were a little more dangerous, and I ended up in a backyard chemical accident in my neighborhood. I had a jar of homemade explosives that exploded in my hand. I blew off most of my right hand and was instantly blinded by the flying glass fragments from the beaker that sliced up both eyes. So as a 16-and-a-half-year-old in high school, I suddenly was not only disabled, but multiply disabled. I was blind and an amputee. So at that time, I came face to face with a big challenge. What do? Do you just sit at home? Do you wait for somebody to take care of you? Or do I try to work with the challenges presented by blindness and amputation? Well, as a 16-and-a-half-year-old, I made one of the probably wisest decisions in my life. I said, there's a lot of life ahead from a 16-and-a-half-year-old perspective to just hang out and wait for somebody else to do something or something else to happen. Now remember, I'm kind of an old man compared to a lot of you around here. She didn't mention that I used to be a university professor, so I occasionally do pop quizzes. So here's the first quiz. This is an age test. Okay, the question is, now don't cheat. There's probably rules against that around here. This is a college. I'm going to ask you a question, and there are 3 answers. I want you to applaud for the answer you want to pick. The question is, what is a Smith Corona? Answer number one. Don't cheat. Answer number one. Clap if you think it's a beer. Okay, got a few. All right. Second, a Smith Corona. Answer number two is a firearm, a gun. Okay, got a few more. Okay, now clap if a Smith Corona is a typewriter. Now, I'll give you the answer key. If you're under 30, you think it's a beer. Okay? If you're between 30 and 45, you think it's a firearm. Okay? And if you're over 45, you know it's one of the most famous typewriters that was ever made. Now, if you don't know what a typewriter is, then, you know, that's a whole other story. At the time, just to put this in perspective, there were Smith Coronas that were typewriters, not beers. And there was no internet. There was no network. There were no chat groups. There was no place for a 16-year-old blind kid in West Virginia to find out very much about how to deal with this. That probably was a good thing in my case because it shaped a lot of the personality that I've used to approach blindness for the rest of my life. So, you'll laugh, because today this is a trivial question, but one of the first challenges to me at 16 was, how do I know what time it is? That was really on my mind. I hated to bother people all the time. Ask my mother, my father, my brother, what time is it? So, you know, you could dial this number on the phone and get this little recording, and it would tell you what time it is. Well, that was kind of cool, but no cell phone, so you could only do that if you were on the phone, if you were near a phone and nobody else in the family was on the phone, and so on. So that was my first challenge of, okay, how do you create a tool? How do you deal with this problem that you don't have an answer to? So I took my 4-inch diameter wind-up alarm clock that was on my nightstand that I used all the time when I could see, and took it downstairs to the workshop, and I took it apart and took the glass out. So my first adaptive technology, homemade, was to take the glass out of my own alarm clock so that I could feel the hands. This is a first example. Again, I don't care how many of these you like or don't like. Just think about what you can apply to your own life philosophy. But my first lesson that I learned is make your own tools. Don't wait for somebody else to fix your problem. You may wait a long time for somebody else to fix your problem, and you may come up with a better solution than what somebody else has come up with. So be your own advocate is the first point. So from there, a little while later, I finished high school, did the rest of high school. I had one more year to go. I was a junior. I had the senior year to go. My parents read my textbooks. I took all my exams orally. I didn't know Braille, any of that stuff. I went off to a rehab center in nearby Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh. I lived near there. And learned Braille so learned how to be a blind person. This was great. Cane mobility, abacus, anybody remember those? Learned how to use the abacus to do math, and not quite long division. Anybody, if you can do long division, you're better at it than I am, but addition, subtraction on the abacus, and so on. Then I went off to college. So I went off to college where I continued with my pre-disability plan of being an electrical engineer. Let's just say I didn't really have the enthusiastic support of my rehab counselor. There was just sort of this, what do you mean you want to be an electrical engineer? Blind people don't be electrical engineers, they be rehab counselors and things like that, you know? So that was one battle. So we got through that battle. Second battle was with the chemistry department. The chemistry department said, we can't have a blind guy in freshman chemistry. And the engineering college said, well, wait a minute, freshman chemistry is a requirement. You can't be an electrical engineer if you don't have freshman chemistry.
You could find this event in its entirety and others by logging on to baruch.cuny.edu/DML and then type CCVIP in the search field.